Welcome, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely Sunday. It's my immense pleasure to be chatting with both Cole and Yvette. Something that grounds me so much in theater, and I'm sure for us all, is the power of relationships in our life, whether that's with family, friends, colleagues, collaborators. Both of these artists have, in indirectly or direct ways, so much impacted my artistic life. I was a wee little baby playwright when I went to Banff, and Yvette so kindly around this buffet table gently prodded me, just breathe, just write, or go for a walk. And that has just forever shaped that generosity and mentorship at that moment. And with Cole, through different processes of acting and rehearsals, the wisdom, the guidance, the space, the welcoming that you've provided has shaped me. And Lemon Tree has been a core part of my coming to be an actor and artist as well. Big part of this relationship too is also my relationship as a first-generation Chinese-Canadian immigrant from Hong Kong in Canada, and coming to Canada with such a lack of knowledge around Indigenous stories and culture. And something that I've learned, and in my research and learnings from these both, is, as an ally, the power of listening and learning, and the privilege that that is, to just listen and learn. And so I welcome everyone in this room together today to enjoy this privilege of learning by listening to these two incredible arts leaders. I hope that in this conversation you feel in relationship to both this story, but also to the great artistry, wisdom, and graciousness of these two artists. So with that said, I wanted to start a little bit about relationships. Sort of the relationship you both have together as artists, as co-directors on this piece, and then also, of course, the relationship to this play, Three Fingers Back, the two plays, as well as with Donna Michelle, our lovely playwright.
All right. I'll begin because I'm older and I've been around longer. And I'm disappointed that Donna Michelle's not here today. She's disappointed that she's not here today because it's kind of our 20th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
Donna Michelle came to, I was leading Native Earth Performing Arts. I had just come, and we were looking for a general manager, and Donna Michelle walked in, and we did an interview, and we laughed so hard. The chair of my board, who was Jesse Wente at the time, and me, and Donna Michelle, and she walked out, and he was like, well, that's obviously the person. And that was the beginning of our relationship. So Donna Michelle became the administrator at Native Earth and then grew into the role of general manager at Native Earth. When I got there, the place was a little bit unstable, shall I say, and DM and I developed this relationship to rebuild the company, to develop the company that ended in, like, they now have a space called Aki. So it was a great sort of partnership for 8 or 9 years. But all the time we were doing that, Donna Michelle was saying, will you read my plays? And I was like, sure. And she was giving me piles of work. And I was like, okay. And then she'd say, which one? And I was like, I said, well, my favorite of this pile is Gas Girls, which she said, okay, then we'll produce it. So she produced it off the side of her desk at Native Earth, and we supported her because we were sort of of the one bucket theory, like all of the resources in one bucket, and then we just make the work. And so that was the beginning of our relationship. It's always been let's just make the work together, whatever that means. So we were really involved in each other. And then we left Native Earth. I left first. She left shortly after me. She had already was running this company off the side of her desk, New Harlem Productions. And in the meantime of all of that, of course, all of these people were coming into our network, including Cole Alvis. How's that for a segue?
Miigwech. Tansei, y'all. I came to Degarundo by way of the prairies and was training at York University, where a lot of the work was predominantly white, I'll say, of the works that we were looking at. This is circa 2006. And so one of my first jobs was working at the bar here at Tarragon, and I first met Yvette when she was directing a Turtle Gals performance production. The Only Good Indian was in the space that Three Fingers Back will be in downstairs. And so I think we were between the two doors getting into the theater, and I cornered you with questions and a desire to meet you. And to fast forward to my first production within Native Earth at the time, Guy Waden is an Indigenous operaist by Denome Welch. It has Anishinaabe Moan, French and English. And to be entering into a reclamation process within my family around our Métis and Michif ancestry, inspired by the collaborations that came out of my opportunities to work with Native Earth Performing Arts. It's a bit of a full circle moment to, all these years later, be collaborating with Yvette as co-director, absolutely a mentor of mine, and to moving into a position of peer is an exciting evolution. And that Donna Michelle and Yvette were both part of this reclaiming moment for me and my family. It feels really important to come full circle and to be engaging in this work with all of you, ready to share it.
Thank you both. In terms of sort of the relationship with the process of this play in particular, I know that Lemon Tree had gone through development and workshop opportunities. I was wondering if you'd be open to sharing some behind the scenes look into how this play was developed through the course of these years.
Sure, I'll jump in and then throw to you. So it's two plays. Give It Up is the first. The Smell of Horses is the more recent play. Mm-hmm. And so Give It Up was one of, I assume, in the pile that you're referring to. It's a play that's been around for a long time. It has been published. I remember attending workshops while volunteering at Native Earth. I think I was selling plays at a table the night that show had a workshop at Theatre Passe Muraille. And so it's been in the mix for some time. Donna Michelle St. Bernard's an artistic associate at Lemon Tree Creations, and The Smell of Horses is the B-side of this work that's been around for some time.
They think they're the A-side, but they're actually the B-side. I'm just giving you that warning first.
So we've been more involved having workshops within The Smell of Horses, in that Give It Up's been kind of what it is for some time. Do you want to go back further to workshops of Give It Up? Were you present for those, or?
I feel like Donna Michelle lives inside me in a bunch of ways because of how much of her work I've seen and read and done. And I've been involved in so many things along the way. In fact, The Smell of Horses is the most recent thing of hers that I ever read, which is amazing. I mean, since then I've read other things, but at the moment that we started talking about it, I was like, oh, so this is what happens on the other side of the door, and was really surprised by it. But maybe we should talk about the workshop. We weren't in this room. We were in this room or in the other? It was this room.
This is where we were, yeah.
Where we did a workshop 100 years ago.
A couple Novembers ago, for sure.
A couple of Novembers ago.
Yeah.
Because the plays are two sides of one story, we sort of carted out the whole plays, both the plays, to see where the points of intersection were along the way. And so that has been fascinating in doing this work, developing the work and finding where those moments are, and then finding that when they're up on their feet in the world, in this world. But I digress.
I think what I would add is, within a co-director dynamic, when there are two plays, I think some folks assume that one of us will take one play and the other will the other, and that was never the deal for the two of us. Because they intersect, we needed both of our minds on the singular world, how it is experienced by the folks in the first one, and then the second differs. But it's been a collaboration, thinking of both plays as one world.
Yeah, and I was only ever interested in this kind of a process. I'm not interested in working alone as a director, because we always talk about how theater is so collaborative, and then we go into rooms where, like, I'm the boss, just make it so, and I'm like, I'm not interested in that. I'm only now interested in working with a larger team, whether it's a co-director, an associate director. We should shout out to Aria Evans, who is our movement director and intimacy and violence coordinator, who did a lot of the work of keeping of the show, which you'll see. So it's a big, but also in my rooms, like, it's like, I like to work in circle, so it's not a hierarchy, but it's in circle, and then everybody carries more weight. So everybody's responsible who's in the room. And so, yeah, if you'd been like, want to come and direct one of the shows, I'd be like, yeah, no. But since we knew that it was going to be, we were always working towards this bigger picture, and that's the way we were going to work in community, then, yeah, that was the thing that appealed to me.
I think in relation to relationship, we had collaborated on Pamutuin, which is a Thompson Highway opera, as well as Galabartneet, which is Raudna Karita Era, another opera from Sapmi territory. And so we presented those as a double bill. Michael Greyeyes and I co-directed those together in this similar dynamic, both of us on both shows. And Yvette was the dramaturg for Galabartneet. And so within that circle that you're describing, we were in a shared leadership model developing that process. Because it's challenging in co-director dynamics, but having had the history that we have and the opportunity to collaborate in this way, I knew that it would go well.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing those contexts. Something that I'm so curious and drawn to in both of your bodies of work too is that you are all so performers, playwrights, and so in this specific role as being co-directors on this piece, could you speak a little bit more on sort of the specificity of what that process is like and what all the different hats you wear sort of nourish this experience of being co-directors and all of your artistry?
Yeah, it's funny because it feels like a lot of the world is moving towards, I mean, if you're going to be a theater artist in this country, you have to be able to do more than one thing. Whether it's like direct a show and pull a coffee at your local Starbucks. Like, that's two things. Or if you're lucky, direct a show, write plays, stage manage, administer. You can, and I was a theater rat when I was young, and I would do anything to stay in the theater, which is, I guess, why I became so many things. Because I'm like, okay, I can't be an actor because I was terrible. I was, you know, and then I started writing plays because I was seeing a lot of plays that didn't, I'm like, where is my story? So I started writing plays, and then I started directing them because I couldn't find anyone who would direct them for free. And then once I started accomplishing, you know, a body of work, I started being asked to look at other people's plays, and that's how I became a dramaturge. And so all of those things, I think, come into the rooms when we do the work. That the silos are kind of arbitrary anyway, right? Like, the silos are, I work a lot in opera. I work a lot with, Cole talked about Gywaden, where I met Marion Newman. Tomorrow I go to Kelowna to be with Marion Newman and work on a piece at Opera Kelowna with Marion and Melody. And Marion talks a lot. You might know her. She hosts Saturday afternoon at the opera.
And she created Rita George.
Rita Joe in the opera.
Yeah. I saw it.
In the opera one, yes. Yeah, she's fantastic. But she talks a lot about, when people ask her, like, why would an Indigenous person be in opera? Because she's Quaguth and Stolo, and she said, but we've always used all of these things when we're telling stories, song and dance and mask. And working with Marion, I was like, oh yeah, right. This siloing is actually unnatural, and we as Indigenous people have always used all of these tools to tell story. And so it feels like having all of those, why would you leave your dramaturge hat at the door or your playwright hat at the door? I mean, and Donna Michelle and I started in that sort of mess of, like, we're running a theater and she's the GM and I'm the AD, but we're also, like, writing plays and directing plays and doing things together. So it just feels like we never leave ourselves outside the room. When we come in to rehearse things, we bring all of our history and all of our ancestors and all of our skill set to the work. And it's just a matter of negotiating how we do that in a way that helps the work move forward and stand up. I'm talking way too much. You
You're
talk
doing great.
now.
Beautiful articulation. Thank you. Thank you.
Regarding multiple hats, I did train in acting specifically, and
Was a way better actor than I ever was. Like the first time I ever saw Cole, they were playing it was Lucy in Not Wanted on the Voyage in a York University production.
See.
And I was like, who is that? Before I ever met her, I saw her on stage, and then I ran into you backstage. You were about to go on at Buddy's in The Boys in the Band.
Okay.
And you were all done up as Harold. And I was like, who is that? All of my experiences with Cole acting have been like, who is that? So she's great, which is good because I was terrible.
Thank you for saying all of that. And I've never heard you talk about yourself as a performer. I don't believe you. I think there can be a concern around multiple hats, or there can be a concern around diversifying, particularly as artists. And I think theater school suggested we pick one thing. And I would say, as soon as I graduated, I was learning about producing. Production management is what my first gig at Native Earth was, learning about production management. And so if there was any hesitation around, will they forget that I do this? My experience has been, it's what's kept me in the theater. The opportunities and the people that I've met has helped from a networking perspective. But at this point in my career, what I feel grateful for is when a project comes to my desk, it's how do I fit into this? Of the things that I can now do, which is the thing that I can contribute? And what I find is that allows me to believe in the pieces that I'm working on, because now I'm choosing it for itself and not necessarily a specific aspect of theater that I do.
Thank you both for sharing those sort of intersections of practice, and you're so right. Both of you, those silos can be arbitrary. Talking around the intersections, it's something that I'm really curious about is, in terms of Three Fingers Back and the overall larger picture for Donna Michelle's body of work called the 54ology, where do you find that intersection of your own identity with this sort of body of work?
Yeah, miigwech for that. The 54ology asks us to lean in. It asks us to show up. It's an opportunity to do the research. In this case, Give It Up is steeped in a women's resistance group coming out of Angola. The Smell of Horses is inspired by events that occurred around torture in Guinea-Conakry, where specific injuries were identified by the medical field, and a flag was raised around what was happening in this outpost. And so when we are taking these two plays that are inspired by events in two different countries, we are building our world that is launching off of the world that Donna Michelle has offered us in the piece. And it requires, as I mentioned, that we lean in, that we look for the parts that are familiar to us and that we understand. And I think the opportunity within this, along with the research around these specific regions, is in developing the world that these plays are set in. The actions, both awful and joyful, can happen in any part of the world. And so particularly right now, this is an opportunity to be engaging in these themes and really looking at how power is wielded.
Yeah.
I'll hold there.
Yeah. And it's so funny because Donna's plays, they give us a distance to be able to look at something. Like, we keep talking in the room about the plays are very hard, like challenging for everybody, for the audience, for the actors. It's like, but there's also a distance involved because it's not here, and there's a comfort in, like, at least it's not here. But it's also it can also be a cautionary tale in terms of what we do here or have here. when we did, it's interesting to me because when we did Gas Girls, when Donna produced Gas Girls, the very first play produced out of the 54ology, and then she won a Dora for it. And she got up on stage and she said, this is part of the 54ology. I'm going to write 54 plays inspired by Africa. And they laughed, which you shouldn't laugh at Donna Michelle unless she's actually trying to be funny, because she just takes it as a challenge. But we used the same, this was part of the, the network. We used the same set. Like we were both in the Pass Marais back, little tiny space. And we used the same designers. Jackie Chow did the set design, and she designed both Gas Girls and Salt Baby, which was the show that Native Earth was producing. And we had them up against each other, so we finished one show and then we went to the other show. So we were sharing resources, which was brilliant and great. And Salt Baby was a comedy by Phelan Johnson, who's Mohawk, Tuscarora. You may know her from The Secret Life of Canada. It was a comedy. It was funny. And it was about being a Salt Baby. She presents white, even though she's Mohawk and Tuscarora. And it's about identity. And Gas Girls is about young women on the Zimbabwean border. Zimbabwean border, who sell gas, who sex for gas and gas for to feed their families, essentially, and people came more to Gas Girls than they did to Salt Baby, and I was like, I said to the chair of my board, who was, I know I'm dropping his name a lot this morning, Jesse Wente at the time, in a board meeting, I don't understand. We did a comedy, but people came more to Gas Girls. We have a whole theater company behind us, and Donna did this. We did this off the side of Donna's desk. And he said, oh, but they're able to get some distance from that story. Whereas with Salt Baby, it's about us who live here now together. And I was like, it was so enlightening to me, so illuminating, that was another obstacle in terms of making Indigenous work in this country. Wow. Was the relationship with the audience that's about, and we know it, we're in the middle of reconciliation right now, right? We know about the feelings of responsibility, accountability, and guilt, maybe, and sorrow and grief.
Kamloops.
Thank you, Kamloops. Yes, all of those things. And so maybe audiences are like, yeah, I don't want to go and feel that responsible. I'm going to go to the other one because I don't have to feel as responsible. And yet, Gas Girls for me is about young women who are forced to do sex work in order to feed their families, which is that's a thing we have here too, in my communities.
Yeah. Thank you both. Something that, Cole, you just spoke about now in your wonderful articulation, and in something that was highlighted in an interview that you did with Intermission magazine, I believe just last year. The ending of this, I encourage you all to read this. It starts with such a bang. Yvette identifies as an apocalyptist.
Oh yeah.
But the essay comes down to the end around the need for joy. And what you just shared now too, Cole, around that there's joy in these plays, even in the sorrow, even in the tougher themes, even with the distance. Could you speak a little bit about how maybe joy, specifically in this production and process, has found its way in?
Sure, it is essential. Terrible things happen in this play, spoiler alert. And it's a choice to invite a group of artists together to spend weeks upon weeks upon weeks inside these stories in this world. And it was crucial in our rehearsal process and in how we were engaging with each other that we laugh and sing and dance and find moments to expel what it is to hold and share these stories. Aria Evans, who we've referenced, brought us a process of stepping in and stepping out at each day, which is a physical and vocal gesture that we were all participating in, and now as we're moving towards opening, the performers together circle up and we can hear them after the show, shaking off what it was that is required of us in this storytelling. And so it's important that we care for each other in the process. And some of that joy we're wanting to offer to audiences. And in that vein, we have a community arts activation in the lobby. Kemi King is the coordinator of crafting the work that's on offer there. Within this program, it includes a bit of a mentorship opportunity for the students from University of Toronto Scarborough who've been witnessing our process in the room. They're having conversations one-on-one with some of the artists on the creative team, and they will be present as what we're calling docents to engage with all y'all before the show at intermission, to share any questions you may have around the gallery. And the hope for this was to, as we're doing our work of thinking how to provide care for our artistic team, offering that to the audiences, particularly given the scope of the storytelling for this particular piece.
Thank you, Cole. Yeah.
It has to be, there has to be joy. And at the risk of spoiling the Alice Walker novel for you, resistance is the secret of joy. And so I think about that a lot in these two works particularly, like what we get from, like, I'm an Indigenous, my mother was in 2 residential schools, 1 sanatorium. She not only survived, but thrived. I am the result of that, and just being here and living as I do is, there has to be joy in that. It can't be all about the trauma and the pain. It has to be like, I keep saying, creation's better than destruction, and that's what we're doing. We're creating art, we're creating work, we're telling stories, we're giving voice to people who might not have voice, and there's something that is joyful for me. But also we dance, we break bread together. I got to the rehearsal hall late because I was doing a gig in Montreal, and Cole was like, Powwow Cafe did food yesterday and we saved you one. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. It was great. We do feast to feast our ancestors. I did a show last year, Donna Michelle's show called First Stone, also hard, about children who had been forced to soldier, then returning to their communities. And that was about redemption and reconciliation, which is that's a big theme. There's one of the intersections, right? Yeah. Like, we're talking about Ugandan children who are forced to soldier and then come home. But here on Turtle Island, we're talking about my communities who have been scattered and have a hard time coming home, or are being rejected from home, or have lost their language and feel disconnected because of that. So all of that, but with the First Stone, where we had as terrible things in the First Stone as we have had to deal with in this show, there's dance, there's music. Indrit, who you will see in today's show, was one of our choreographers, and we danced. There's like, we created a dance called the Tomento that's inside the First Stone, very much about community and building community, rebuilding community, resilience of community. So all of those things are joyful. And then to work with artists who are so committed to serving others' voices, there's joy in that too.
Part of the audience care that's connected to the installation is musical artists, musicians who will join us. Camila Diaz-Varela was here on Friday. Nicole Joy Frazier will be back for 2 performances in the next 2 weeks, and Camila will return for the final week. This is a 1 night a week, a 15-minute set. They will be at intermission now as a way to acknowledge what it is to be in this world. You're welcome to have intermission and do what you need, and to provide some care so that you can return and engage. We're also in conversation with Tarragon around the potential of, if one chooses to leave after the first play, that they could return on another date for the second production.
And so these are all radical opportunities to have care and accessibility of what it means to show up and to witness these worlds.
Would that be today or only in evenings?
The performances of the musicians are all in the evenings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for articulating that. Drawing from that as well, something that you both spoke about is the radical resistance of theater and storytelling, of hope and joy, and in facing the hard truths that humans are capable of. I wanted to ask specifically in your own practice and also in the process of creating this, what that sense of resistance has felt like. Or the exploration of resistance, not what it's felt like, that's tougher.
I can jump in to talk about in Galabartneet and Pamutuan, which again, two separate entities that were presented as one evening of experience. We had masks that were created by Mike D'Angeli, a Northwest Coastal First Nation artist. And as is protocol, masks are not to be displayed when they're not being danced, when they're not being used. And so they are to be wrapped in a blanket until they are to be engaged with. And in regards to resistance, I had the opportunity to engage my mom to make the blankets that those masks are kept in. And so while Native Earth Performing Arts, my engagement with Indigenous performance has informed a part of resistance in my familial line when it comes to learning about Indigenous protocol, understanding how, when we return to Turtle Mountain, how I can come into my own community with which I was disconnected. There are many things that I gain from engaging in Indigenous performance and storytelling. And so when I can invite my mom and my family members into that, those teachings and that learning, that feels like a form of resistance within our family line.
For sharing that. Anything for you, Yvette?
Yeah, I don't know. That was such a great story. I'm like, I got lost in it. Oh yeah, that's right. I remember that. Yeah, it is about. Hi, come on.
Hello,
in.
welcome.
Hi.
We thought we were sneaking.
Oh.
Nobody sneaks into our room. Yeah, there is something. There's something joyful in just being unexpected. This is not. There's so, and it's my mom died 17 years ago, and I realized it was too soon because I hadn't done enough. Like I hadn't learned enough from her. But I realized that everything that she did is in me, and I go on for that. And it's just so unexpected that I should be a theater artist. And my parents supported that. My dad was Irish from Ireland, came in the 50s, couldn't get a job as a draftsman, so he became a math teacher in the residential school, where he was my mother's math teacher, and the nuns gave them a wedding. And so I'm a very unlikely creature. But my mother loved words, and she taught me the power of words. And my father loved words. He was the best Irish speaker in Ireland when he was a teenager, like in competitions. And so all of those things inform my practice and the responsibility to my ancestors, not just my mother and my father, my immediate ancestors, but everyone all the way back, and to my descendants, whether they're, artistic or blood, in terms of keeping the space open so that we can hear everybody's stories.
I think it's worth acknowledging, in relation to resistance, the mentorship that Yvette has provided me, but multiple artists, particularly through your time at Native Earth and beyond. When we're talking about resistance, it has at times felt very futile, particularly engaging with Indigenous performance. Keith Barker has talked about working at Native Earth and engaging in Indigenous performance before people wanted to program it. There has been a shifting of tide where examples like the creation of the National Arts Centre Indigenous Theatre, there is Indigenous works programmed in seasons with more frequency than was before. And that we've had the opportunity to be mentored by Yvette, to be developing our craft even when it was a lot of rejection or people just weren't attending. They weren't paying attention. Indigenous theatre's been happening for decades upon decades, and only in the last while have people shown up. And prior to that, Yvette was developing your own craft and the craft of many other artists. And now people are here and seeing our work, and there's much more work to do, but wanting to name, in the spirit of resistance, to be doing that work in spite of the odds.
Thank you. It is a fun little tidbit that I wanted to share with everyone in the room, tying to that sort of mentorship and the relationship with that. In finding interviews with Dawn and Michelle and then interviews with Cole, a phrase was attributed to Yvette around stay in your lane, let amazing people do their amazing work. And that's something that I was like, wow, even across research, your mentorship has rippled into different teachings for others. Did you want to share a little bit about stay in your own lane, but also no pressure to?
Oh, yeah.
A bit of a fun fact.
And again, it goes back to this. I always do this when I'm starting the work. Like, this is the hierarchy, and I'm not interested in it. I push it over and smoosh it around, then it's a circle, and then everybody is responsible. And part of that is that plays into stay in your lane, because if you're this guy and you're like, okay, I'm going to choose that set designer and that sound designer, and then I'm going to tell them I want a house with three, a door upstage left, and it's like, why do you have a set designer then? Mm-hmm. Or if I'm the sound, I'm going to tell the sound person. So it's like the trick to directing is casting everybody, the room, right? Like, not just the actors, but all of your team. And then allowing them to do their work. Mm-hmm. Because for me, I discovered this at some point along the way, like, oh. I'm sorry. That's okay. My brain is not as good as like 7 brains. And so like all of us in the room make something that's better, greater than the sum of its parts. Like, it's like, why would I'm no good at a lot of things, but if I assemble the right people, what we make is better than even everything that we could think up together. And so that requires trust to like let people do their jobs, let people stay in their lane, let the designers, and it doesn't mean that we work in isolation. We actually work more closely, but it's like everybody is feeding into the same story, and it's then it's not just coming out of one whatever that vision thing is. People talk about vision. I don't have a vision when I go into a show, because it has to be created by everybody who comes into the room.
Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to check in briefly, Heather, with the timing. Do we have time for a Q&A portion?
We have time for a short Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you both for this. I'm going to open up the conversation now. If folks here have any questions or reflections, feel free to share them with us. Yes, please.
Yannick Nézé-Séguin, the conductor. I remember seeing a documentary on how he got his orchestra and Metropolitan started, how they became so wonderful, and he developed them. And I remember him, particular scenes, even with an European orchestra, he was guest conducting, but he did it with his own. You are family, you're all the same family. And he made the brass players and the wind players and the non-string players understand. He said, the audience and are listening, and they're seeing this beautiful duck with all the colored feathers swimming on the water, but you're the feet paddling like crazy underneath. Now they can't hear each other in the other parts of the orchestra, but he makes them understand how much each one, even if they can't see or hear or appreciate what the other one's doing, they're all one. And that is exactly what you just told us.
Thank you. Yannick is kind of amazing, the work.
Yeah.
That's the new that's the new way, right? Like there are people coming up who are shifting and changing the old forms. And Yannick is one of them for sure.
Yeah.
And sharing, and and I find that wonderful.
Thank
And
you.
the results are wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody have any questions? Okay.
You're up at NAC.
I was at NAC once upon a time.
Can you bring Breathing Hole, please?
Talk to me after. I have a story about Breathing Hole.
It is part of my bones now. It affected me so much.
Good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Nobody else?
No pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah, really. Thank you.
I'm curious to know a little more about the movement coordination. I read in the program notes that it was kind of particularly important, the way that it was brought in.
Sure, yeah. Torture is part of the narrative of the world that we'll be engaging in today. And it's been crucial from Donna Michelle St. Bernard from the onset that it's not something that occur on stage. And so in collaboration with Aria Evans, we've moved towards an abstract representation of things that do happen on stage. And that is connected to how we care for ourselves and each other inside this. It's important that we lean in and that we engage with these hard truths and these lived realities. But our goal is to show up and examine those things so as to not repeat them, as opposed to re-traumatize each other in the telling of the story.
We never learned.
Thank you.
Heather.
I'll just add that there's a note from Aria Evans in the audience resource guide. I think it's around page 6 or so. If you want to read a little bit more about what she has to say about it, or they have to say about it.
For those with computers.
Thank you. I think we have room for one more question, so thank you so much.
Yeah, all right. So in terms of like set design, I haven't seen the play yet. We'll be seeing it today. What were some of the creative decisions you made, and how come?
Sure. Cesar El Hayek is our set designer, who is from Lebanon, trained in Paris, was a student at York University, and has crafted a set that has many right angles and has many challenges inside of it. It is aesthetic, it is brutal, and also beautiful, and has provided a foundation from which we engage with it, both with love and with it is challenging in the way that these stories are challenging. And so we have been moving towards staging within a rehearsal hall and then doing a lot of learning once we've loaded into the theater and we're engaging with what's actually there. And it is a lesson in working with what's here, particularly when what's here is a structure that can be cold, can be harsh, can be brutal. And that feels like what each of these characters are up against. They are doing their best inside a brutal world.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, and thank you, Cole. Please join me in thanking Yvette and Cole. And thank you so much for being at the theater today on this Sunday. Enjoy the show and see you soon. Thank you.